Hey guys, the Wolf Den here, and today we'll be taking a look at one of my favorite retro 40k models, the 1999 Ork Metal Dreadnought. This was the made-to-order model that was released in 2024 that I finally got around to putting together a few months ago, and is identical to the original model released way back in the late 90s. In this review, we'll be taking a look at the lore surrounding these smoke-belching behemoths of Ork ingenuity, as well as taking a look at the evolution of the Ork Dreadnought, or Deff Dread in Ork speak, in our universe. And finally, we'll be taking a look at the components and the finished model with some size comparisons and my overall thoughts on putting this kit together. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that there's an assembly guide for this model and similar 1999 Ork Metal Dreadnoughts that will be up on this channel as well. So if you're looking for additional reference on how to put your model together, feel free to check it out as I cover more of the specifics on putting this kit together in that video rather than here. Let's get into it. This isn't some puny killer can, so get ready to get crumped, all ya grots. This is no killer can. Ram Tusk. Rawr, Deff Dread pilot. Ork Dreadnoughts, also known as Deff Dreads to the Orks, are in essence an obscene parody of the various Dreadnought and Wraithwalker constructs used by the other races of the galaxy, in which a warrior close to death is allowed to fight on in a mechanical body. Ork versions of these noble machines are clanking, smoke-belching behemoths that are the result of the collaboration between an Ork mech boy and an Ork pain boy, combining their talents to create a technological monstrosity of Orkish might. Ork Deff Dreads are towering machines, several times larger than a man, and often sport various glyphs, sigils, decorations, totems, and other items that the mech who designed the walker found appealing. In addition, each Deff Dread can sport several arms, in which are equipped any number of Ork-killing weaponry, including big shootas, custom mega blastas, scorchas, and rocket launches. These are in addition to massive arms sporting any number of close-range killing devices, such as upscaled power claws, saws, pincers, blades, and various combinations of the two together. The versatility of these weapons, mounted on these mechanical monsters, allow them to deal with any number of threats that an Ork mob may encounter on the battlefield. The creation of an Ork Deff Dread often begins, as it often does in Ork society, with an Ork's dreams of obtaining more status and power within his tribe, in which he will seek out the nearest mech shop, by which this time several of his fellows have more than likely joined him, and will often jostle for position in being the lucky Ork chosen to be interred into the Dreadnought. Unfortunately for the lucky Ork pilot, the Big Mech and the Pain Boy combine their insidious talents, and in a grim parody of the creation of the famous dreadnoughts of the Space Marines, the Ork pilot must be hardwired into the mechanical body of the walker, a fact which is often swept under the rug for the aspiring pilot. This procedure would normally fall under the supervision of an Ork mech boy. However, the mech is unable to wire the pilot into the machine directly that controls its movement, much like a Space Marine dreadnought does. And this is where the particular set of skills that the Pain Boys possess come into play, in which the Pain Boys' Orky know-whats and know-how allow them to wire the pilot into the Dreadnought's hull itself in order to precisely control its movements. However, this symbiosis of Ork and machine brings about the revelation that the pilot is no longer able to destroy their enemies personally in hand-to-hand combat, and is now forced to consume his meals through a straw in the Deff Dread's hull. This simple fact often tends to drive these new pilots insane, with a combat rage that often results in the destruction of several nearby buildings in an Ork settlement, before it can be reined in and brought under control. This is often referred to as running in, and is a frequent enough occurrence with the birth of these machines. This battle rage tends to stay with their pilots, who will often take any opportunity to punish their enemies in a misdirected revenge on those who imprisoned them in the Death Dread in the first place, despite having signed up for the position themselves. Ork Dreadnoughts will often march to war in support of their tribe's boys, their claws and ranged weapons providing the perfect solution to troublesome infantry squads, vehicles, and even fortifications. Sometimes, mechs in the tribe become so obsessed with building these metal monsters that they'll form dread mobs, in which groups of Ork Dreadnoughts, often accompanied by Killikans, their smaller cousins piloted by Grots, and other mech creations will fight together in unison on the battlefield with catastrophic results for their enemies. There have even been sightings of what has been called Big Mech Dreads on the battlefield, which are larger and more advanced versions of their Death Dread cousins. They differ in the fact that the mech who controls the Big Mech Dread will do so as an orc would drive a truck, and that they can get in and out if they so choose and aren't hardwired into the cockpit, like traditional orc vehicles. These fearsome machines have only been seen within the ranks of the Bad Moons clan, as their riches are the only thing that can afford the massive cost of producing these variants of Death Dreads. Big Mech Dreads are often equipped with the normal range of Death Dread weaponry. However, some have been sighted wielding modifications, such as the deadly shock attack gun integrated into the Dread's weapon systems. Death Dreads will lead the way in the pure slaughter of the Orcs' foes on battlefronts across the galaxy, with the deafening cries of "Wah" projecting from these mechanized beasts for all to hear, and is often the last thing countless enemies have experienced before meeting their inevitable demise. The Ork Dreadnought has had numerous models throughout the history of the Warhammer 40k tabletop game, and have seen quite a few variations and incarnations throughout this time, and have been around since some of the earliest days of Warhammer, making it unique among Games Workshop models, as you can see Games Workshop's design philosophy sort of evolve alongside of these models, going from the sort of goofier rogue trader look to the more serious version of the current plastic dreadnought. The first incarnation of the Ork Dreadnought first appeared in 1988, during the rogue trader era of 40k's long history. Sculpted in all metal, these egg-shaped dreadnoughts first stomped onto the scene. A bit strange looking by modern-day model standards, the first ever Ork Dreadnought, seen here painted in the livery of the Bad Moons, would begin the long trend of orc walkers being cylinder shapes on legs, sporting various melee and ranged weapon configurations. And you can see that the orc pilot is wired directly into the cockpit on this model. A similar version was also released in 1988, which sports only a single claw and ranged weapon as well, making it similar to what would eventually become the Killikans. The second version of the Ork Dreadnought appeared in 1993. In what may be the strangest member of the Ork Dreadnought family, Tree wasn't plastic or metal at all, but was actually cardboard. This interesting dreadnought, released in the Warhammer 40k 2nd edition box set, was a cardboard Ork Dreadnought that was used to represent a newer version of the model in games. The image of the dreadnought is certainly imposing for a cardboard cutout, still retaining the design cues from the first model, but modernizing them a bit, featuring 2 more power claws and more defined ranged weapons. 1994 saw the third release in the lineage of the Ork Dreadnought, this time bringing the cardboard cutout into reality, with an all-new, all-lead miniature, featuring a much wider stance as well as a larger body, with powerful power claws and ranged weapons to deal death. It also features a bull-headed banner pole and a cockpit hatch which can be opened or closed to reveal the driver inside. In 1999, the Ork Dreadnought received yet another upgrade, this time even larger than before, and a wider range of weapons, glyphs, gubbins, and close combat weapons. Much like its predecessor, this model was also made of metal, however this time it was introduced in white metal instead of lead. And this is the model that we'll be covering in this video. Finally, in 2010, both the Killer Can and the Ork Dreadnought, now mainly referred to as a Deff Dread, was given its final and most current model, gaining faceplates, additional decorations, more elaborate exhaust pipes, more weapons, and a hunched-over appearance. And this is the form that it retains to this day. So here we have the rather unimpressive online order Games Workshop box. Nothing really special about it, but it's no surprise that these are the boxes that are used when you order items online. It has some decent graphics on it, but nothing really to write home about. It would have been cool if there was a retro packaging or at least a picture of the model on the box, but what you see is what you get, really. You can definitely feel the heft of the box, though, in its unopened state. And here on the bottom left, we have the Ork Dreadnought as far as the labeling goes. That's really pretty much it, and all there is to say about the box. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the contents of the Ork Dreadnought. There was such little content in this box that I decided to just snap a few pictures, as there really wasn't much inside to show outside of the model itself. Inside of the box, we have a plastic blister, which, as you can see here, was actually broken in quite a few places, with the tiny metal parts moving around inside before I even got the model out of the blister, with the metal dreadnought, the base, and the decal sheet inside. All of the parts from my model, as far as I can tell, are here, luckily. However, for a $70 made-to-order model, coming with a broken inner package is honestly some of the sloppiest packaging from Games Workshop that I have seen in a long time, and is really disappointing given the usual high-quality standard of Games Workshop products and models. Little did I know that this would be an indicator of how unenjoyable this kit would be to experience. So here we have a brief look at the parts that make up the Dreadnought, as they're really the only contents of the box to take a look at. For what it's worth, the details on these metal casted parts are pretty good. However, a lot of the more small details have become soft over time and aren't as sharp as they were originally, which is understandable for a mold that's almost 30 years old at this point. There are no miscast pieces as far as I can tell, which is nice given how many metal parts there are, as this kit is entirely made of metal, and nothing is broken out of the box either, despite its rather haphazard packaging. First out of the way is the base. It's a standard Games Workshop large model base, really nothing here to write home about. As for the rest of the metal parts, the idea theoretically is rather simple. The body halves fit together, the top and the bottom connect, the legs plug into the side, the arms plug into the sockets, the weapons glue to the arms, and the detail pieces go on. With the weapons going onto each one of these pegs here, we have quite a few sprues of metal decoration bits and gubbins, which is nice, as well as a banner pole with a few skulls on it, which are modeled rather well given their small size. The weapons are molded rather well too, as well as most of the parts being nicely detailed with no major casting issues as far as I can tell. One thing that I'll be showing off in this video is how to make the weapons swappable without the use of magnets, which in this case is actually quite easy, and it's something I'll cover a bit more in depth in the assembly video that I mentioned before. So overall, not many parts to this model, which is nice given how much trouble I would have putting it together. We also have the older Games Workshop Ork transfer sheet in the box as well, which is actually pretty nice, all things considered. It has the Ork clans with transfers for each faction, as well as general glyphs and symbols and markings. I certainly like the variety of the symbols that you get, as Ork iconography can be pretty tricky to try to freehand outside of the basic symbols. With the contents of this kit out of the way, it's time to address the squigoth in the room. There are no instructions for this kit included in the box or on the box. Nothing. Nothing is included in the box, no reference pages, no guides, no links, or any kind of helpful information in the slightest to assemble this kit. I was genuinely really shocked at this when I first opened the package and couldn't find any instructions. I thought it might have been an error, but nope, nothing is included in this box. Originally, the metal 1999 Ork Dreadnought featured the old style of Games Workshop packaging, which featured a basic model assembly guide on how to put the model together, usually found on the back of the box. As you can see here by this photo, this is an example. This model, however, lacks that entirely, and for a $70 made-to-order specialty kit from Games Workshop, who prides themselves on their premium miniatures, with no indication that it would be lacking instructions in the listing, is absurd. Yes, you can find reference and instructions online, like these here, which I found. However, for someone purchasing this model with no real experience in metal models, and this might be their first metal kit, even for an older Games Workshop metal kit, many of which were simple to put together, usually being a backpack and a head, and even the vehicles, which were usually like 4 to 5 pieces, I am severely disappointed in the lack of instructions or any kind of helpful guide included in this kit. And I wish that they had included something, even a photocopied page of the instructions found in the old box. The fact that there's nothing is a shame, really scores negatively against this kit in total for that. I genuinely think it's a shame because this kit had a lot of potential, but the fact that there's nothing in terms of instructions is really shocking to me, as it feels like an older Forge World kit that at least those gave you a finished photo of what the model was supposed to look like. This gives you nothing, and frankly, I'm kind of appalled given how this kit's almost $100 and there's no reference or instructions in it. Now with the contents out of the way, let's take a closer look at the finished Ork Metal Dreadnought while I go over my thoughts on having put this kit together. So here we have the finished Ork Metal Dreadnought from 1999. Before we begin, I just want to say how much of a massive pain this kit was to build. And I have experience in putting together large resin, metal, and hybrid kits, including large resin Forge World models, large metal models, and hybrid metal plastic models from other companies as well. And for context, I gave this model a wash with my ultrasonic cleaner with dish soap to remove all of the release agent that is normally found on these metal models that interfere with the gluing process. The simple fact is that this kit did not want to go together or stay together no matter how much glue and work I put into it, and I feel that most of this model at this point is super glue with the metal coating, rather than being made of white metal. The arms, even when I would glue them, would fall out constantly. However, the worst part of this model was arguably the feet and legs. On mine, no matter how much I scored the sides of the legs, or no matter how much super glue I used, these legs and feet would not stay put or hold the model's weight up at all. I nearly resorted to pinning the legs to the body, which I feel like on a redo of this build, I would probably have to, and I feel like at some point I will probably have to pin the legs in the future. But I feel like if I were to build this kit again from scratch, or on the Ork Dreadnought that I'm going to be restoring for this channel, I will be pinning that one's legs, because no matter what I did to it, the legs and feet would not stay together, and as you can see, certainly don't look very well. But this kit was an absolute nightmare to put together, and it really seemed right out of the gate that it was going to fight me every step of the way. And it was not a fun experience for me to do at all, which is saying something given how many kits that I've put together. Bits were falling off as I worked on it constantly, including a lot of the small decorative pieces, even though I felt like I coated them in super glue, would not remain on, and it seemingly felt like I built 3 of these dreadnoughts instead of 1 due to the amount of repairs and re-gluing I had to do for a single model. That being said, I could have received a bad cast or any number of other issues in order to put this model together. And yes, I do understand that I probably should have pinned the legs. However, I'm usually able to get most of my builds, even metal or resin kits, to cooperate without pinning, unless we're talking like a Titan scale model here. I understand that in order to have probably done this properly, I should have pinned it. But the reason that I didn't pin the feet to the legs is that there's really no room to actually pin the model together, at least in terms of the ankles and the feet. That being said, the finished model does look really nice, and it's one of the reasons that I wanted to buy this kit. This was, to me, when I was younger, the definitive Ork Dreadnought, and for a long time, whenever I saw one in my old codexes or books, it was usually this one. So I do have a soft spot for it, and I do think that once it's done and you have it all together, it looks really nice. It has a lot of character. It's imposing, it's large, and the buzzsaw and the scissor arms look really intimidating for how simple they are, something that the plastic Deff Dread kind of overdoes a bit, in my opinion. Taking a quick look at a 360 of the model, and of course it starts to shed parts, as you can see. You can see the amount of detail that really covers this model, even though a lot of it has softened for this model in particular. The top hatch features a lever to open the main body, as well as a smoke launcher and various other gubbins and detail parts. The boss pole in particular is well detailed, featuring 2 skulls and what I believe is either a Chaos Android head or a Chaos Space Marine helmet attached to it, or even an early Necron head. One of the nice things that this model is capable of doing is that the arms are posable to a degree, not so much by intention, but rather if you apply a bit of super glue onto the rods that connect into the body, you can actually pivot them up and down. However, you would probably want to glue these in one position as they are a bit heavy. What I chose to do is add a bit of super glue onto each of the rods, so that way I can pose them a bit, add a bit more character to the model, as well as letting me take the arms out to paint them separately. And I chose to do this after I tried to hard glue the arms a few times and they simply would not cooperate. So I feel like you might have to pin these as well to the main body. And I also did this so that I could possibly change the loadouts to something a bit more modern later on. One arm features a wicked looking buzzsaw that I really like, and the other arm features a pair of scissors. There are a lot of details on each arm: cables, rivets, and joints, pistons, and other gubbins. As you can see, each arm can be swapped into the other's sockets, so you can change the pose or the orientation of each arm and what weapon each arm has if you prefer to have your model set up a different way. You can see the details as well as the weapon mounts. It really is a sizable model. As we look at the back of the model here, you can see all of the bells, whistles, and belts which drive the engine, as well as a closer look at the small wheel that fell off earlier. This model has a tendency to shed its parts, which even just by handling on its base, I would lose a part constantly here or there. We also have a few extra parts, mainly this smaller hose, as well as several of these small turn wheels or cranks. Moving on to the weapons, we have a choice between 3 ranged weapons. We have a rocket launcher, mounted as a single piece. We have a big shooter, which can be placed either on the left side or the right side of the Dreadnought. And we have a scorcher, which can be placed either on the left or the right side as well, depending on your preference. I love the look of the scorcher. It really looks cobbled together, especially with one part being tied here. By adding a small bit of glue onto each peg, as well as the holes located on each weapon to mount into the peg itself, it is actually possible to make it so the weapon systems can be swapped with either side, as well as what weapons can be positioned onto the body without magnets, as each weapon system is quite heavy and would require a rather strong magnet to hold up against the body, unless you opted to use plastic weapons from the Ork Deff Dread instead, which is actually pretty nice, so you don't have to commit to a single loadout. So you can have a rocket launcher or a big shooter. You can have a scorcher and a big shooter. You can have a rocket launcher and another arm. The slots in which the weapons attach to the body are roughly the same size as the arm slots, and I believe with a pin vise you could certainly bore out the holes to be a bit bigger if you wanted to run a purely melee Dreadnought, or if you wanted to run 3 power claws and a scorcher, you certainly could, much like the modern Dreadnoughts as well. That being said, a few extra weapons would have been nice, given how you kind of just get the bare minimum here. But that being said, it is nice that you do get at least more than one ranged option. And now on to some size comparisons. First and foremost, we have the metal 1999 Dreadnought compared to a Space Marine, and as suspected, the War Machine towers over Space Marine. Next, we have the Dreadnought compared to Boss Snickrot, previously reviewed on this channel. Third, we have the 1999 Dreadnought compared to the current, as of the time of this video, Plastic Ork Meganob kit. Next is my custom war boss for my Ork army, which uses the old metal Gazkul Thraka model as its body, as the base, and even he is dwarfed by the metal Deff Dread. And finally, we have a comparison between the new plastic Deff Dread kit and the old 1999 Deff Dread, and surprisingly, size-wise, the kits aren't too far off. They are very similar to each other in size and scale, though the new plastic model is a bit wider and a bit bulkier than the metal model. So if you're looking for something a bit different to run in your Ork army, this could potentially be it if you're up for the headache of putting it together. Now that we've taken a completed look at the finished model, I'd like to sum up my overall thoughts on the made-to-order 1999 Ork Metal Dreadnought. Category 1. Build. 2 out of 5. I would give the 1999 Ork Metal Dreadnought a low score of 2 out of 5 for the build category, even with a super strong superglue, as parts range from having a whopping 0 clearance with each other, such as the can of the body that feels like you almost have to break it to put the pieces together, to almost non-workable, such as the legs, that without pinning feel almost impossible to make stay on the Dreadnought's body without any form of extra support. I did not have a good time putting this thing together, and I'm well versed in metal and resin model kits. The building experience was stressful, and it felt like at any moment it was going to come apart again, and I would have to start the whole thing over from basically scratch. Looks, 4 out of 5. The Ork Metal Deff Dread gets a 4 out of 5 for the looks category. I would argue that this kit needs outside materials to make it work, mainly paper clips or a stronger glue like epoxy, as the build itself struggles in quite a few places to hold itself up. Appearance-wise, though, it is definitely a unique version of this older walker, and I happen to like how the finished model looks. It's very reminiscent of an older design philosophy at Games Workshop, and it was intimidating back then as it is now, especially if you're an infantry model on the table, but it definitely feels like a pain getting it there. That being said, the model does look exactly like how it was presented in the images, especially all the reference images that I have, so I can't fault it for that. Material quality, 1 out of 5. Normally, I have zero problem working with Games Workshop metal, especially with the older models that I rescue for this channel. However, the metal used for this model was incredibly unforgiving when I was working with it. However, despite washing the model beforehand with dish soap and my ultrasonic cleaner, it still refused to go together. The metal parts would not bond unassisted, which is unusual even for a metal model, and many parts that had been bonded previously came undone just by handling it. In addition, a few of the parts didn't feel very good to handle, and I felt overall that while I was putting this model together, I didn't receive a very good copy of this kit. Something just felt off to me about this Dreadnought as I put it together, and I didn't enjoy actually completing the model, and it felt more like I just want to get this finished rather than actually taking my time and enjoying the model. Accessories and decals, 3 out of 5. The Deff Dread gets another low score here. While it does come with a good array of extra parts and weapons, I feel like it was the bare minimum. That being said, I do understand that this is an older kit, and it was accurate to the original kit when it released in 1999. However, I do still feel like for the price point that they charged, which was $70 USD, this kit was lacking in its accessories, especially for an Ork kit. I feel like you have the exact parts to build the model and nothing else, and an extra weapon give or take here or there. I understand that this is again an older metal model from long ago, and it felt like they could have at least given you another sprue of accessories or something. And the decals are definitely okay. They're simply just the generic Ork transfer sheet, nothing really useful for this kit, but still nice to have. And finally, the instruction category. I'm giving this kit a 0 out of 5. This is the first time outside of the Ork Super Canon that I'm giving a 0 on this channel, and I doubt it will be the last. The Ork Metal Dreadnought made to order kit does not come with instructions. So let me just say that again, one more time. This kit does not come with instructions or reference in any kind, so you're going to have to do your homework when you're going to put this kit together. I checked the box and the packaging several times over, and my model did not come with any. I was forced to rely on online blurry instructions and reference photos from eBay of the original box, which does come with the instructions on its back, and I wish that Games Workshop had at least included that in this kit. I really was disappointed and let down by the lack of instructions, and I was not happy with not having any physical reference guide and having to look online constantly to how to complete this model. So would I recommend the 1999 made-to-order Ork Dreadnought? Honestly, I wouldn't. This model is not intermediate or beginner friendly at all. And even myself, who have many years of hobby experience, struggled with getting this model to stay together. The build is not fun, and I really didn't enjoy it. The parts would not stay bonded together despite a pre-build scrub and rinse, and I thoroughly was not enjoying myself while I put it together because I felt like at any moment the model was going to come apart. In order to make this kit perfect, you will need experience with pinning metal models together, as well as dealing with metal models in general, and having a stronger bonding agent like epoxy rather than superglue, as my superglue didn't feel like it was up to the job. Despite having worked on countless similar models before, especially metal models with my particular brand of superglue that I use. I do enjoy how the model looks once it's finished, and it's very retro, and it definitely has a certain charm to it once it's finished, and it really beckons to the early 2000s Warhammer design philosophy that I personally really like. And it's what originally drew me to this model. So it's not without its good sides, and it's unique among the Ork Walker sculpts as having a charm all of its own. But that being said, it was a massive headache getting it actually finished, and I feel like even though I'm dubbing it as finished, I'm going to have to go back and pin the legs just so it won't fall apart as I'm trying to paint it. And I would not take this model on without sufficient hobby skill as well as plenty of outside reference material, because again, you will not get any in this box if you purchase this kit. That being said, I don't hate this model. I enjoy how it looks now that it's done, and I am going to hopefully like painting it. If you have to buy this model, I would recommend getting a used one on eBay, stripping the paint, and just repainting a built one instead of going and buying a brand new one. You can actually buy 1999 Ork Dreadnoughts on eBay that are actually sealed from that era. I would certainly not recommend paying full price for this model, as I did not believe it was worth it, and I certainly wouldn't recommend picking this model up unless you really want it for your collection.